What's going on? How you doing? So I thought it'd be a little bit easier to answer your question through this little video. So hopefully it won't take too long. But it's a really good question. Let me go ahead and pull up your question real quick. Okay, so we've got right here your graph, and here's your question over here, Erica. You said this makes, let's see, this graph PowerPoint. I have the note that more vertical equals more compliant. Yes, and so what's happening is if we look at the bottom here, we've got transpulmonary pressure on the x-axis and change in volume on the right on the y-axis. So remember that compliance, if we're actually looking at what the formula is, it's the change in volume for any given change in pressure. So compliance is low if it's really hard, if you have to change like a lot of pressure, if you have to increase the pressure a lot just to get a little bit of volume change, right? So that means the compliance is low, the stretchability is low. But if we do the opposite, it just takes a little bit of a pressure change to make a big volume change, and that means the compliance is high. So with emphysema, typically your compliance, it depends on what you're looking at though, where you're looking at lower lung volumes right here, that like at like 2 or 3, the compliance is really, really high. We see that. But as you increase, right, as you increase lung volume with any of these disease states, with emphysema or fibrosis, we see a decreasing compliance. And that's, I think, what needs to be clear is that as you get to these larger lung volumes, you see a decreasing compliance, whether it's emphysema, normal, or fibrosis, simply because those alveoli are already stretched to the max or to almost close to max. And so it takes a lot larger transpulmonary pressure change to elicit a volume change. Does that make sense? So let's see, this makes sense to me in case of fibrosis. Yeah, when referring to emphysema. And these with emphysema, let's see, would this only be during inspiration? So no, it really depends on what portion of the curve that emphysema, like that person's tidal breath, is on the emphasmatic curve. So remember that this, if you look at emphysema right here, I think I can annotate this. Let me pull up my marker. Can I annotate this? I think so. Right here with this no, I can't draw this. With the emphysema curve, remember that the tidal volume is it's only 500 mils, right? So maybe the person has emphysema, but they're only breathing from 3 liters, if you follow that 3 over to where it intersects with, on the y-axis, where it intersects with the emphysema line, and then you just draw it up and kind of draw it over and draw a little triangle like they have on the normal curve. Then they're just going to be breathing normally in that area, but because they're only breathing in that area and the emphasmatic curve is more steep, that means that under normal tidal breathing, someone with emphysema is going to have increased compliance. Someone with fibrosis, if you just look at that little tidal breathing curve, they will have decreased compliance. Does that make sense? So one aspect of it is we're comparing just tidal breathing between emphysema, normal, and fibrosis. And then if we look at the total curves when we drastically change lung volumes, okay? Does that make sense? Would this only be during inspiration? No, it'd be inspiration and expiration. I mean, really, we talk about compliance with inspiration because that's when we are contracting those muscles to make that pressure change, which would cause a volume change. Okay, when we exhale, or you remember that's a passive process, so we don't actually have to do much for that. Even with the emphysema, it's still a passive process when they exhale. The issue with emphasmatics, though, is they have a harder time doing that because when we inspire, a normal person, right, we inhale and then we exhale. Why is exhale passive? Why is it passive? Well, because the lung has recoil on it that collapses, so that all we have to do is just relax the muscles of inspiration. And then what happens when we relax those? Our lung naturally recoils, right? And that's passive. Emphysema, right, emphasmatics, they don't have as much recoil. So they inhale, and it's really easy because they don't have as much recoil, so they're not fighting against the inward recoil of the lung. And when they exhale, they don't actually exhale as much or as easily, right? Because when they relax the muscles of inspiration, there's not that much inward recoil of the lung because it's been destroyed. That's what defines emphysema. And therefore they actually have to forcefully exhale, right? They have to kind of like hunch over a little bit, or they have trouble getting all the breath out of their lungs. Okay. So you said, to summarize, if asked on the exam if compliance is increased or decreased in emphysema, I would want to select decreased, but this graph states that there. So no. So if asked on an exam if compliance is increased or decreased in emphysema, you have to make sure, like, the question needs to have qualifying other qualifying information, right? Like, normally emphasmatics compliance is increased. Okay, compliance is increased, but when we're looking at a compliance curve with emphysema, what happens is they actually eventually will get to the very top of that curve, right? And so they're at such a large volume that compliance is decreased. It's decreased compared to this little triangle on the normal curve. Does that make sense? So if you take the normal curve triangle right here on this picture, I'm sorry, I can't annotate right here. If you take that normal curve compliance right there, I don't think I can. Yes, I can. Can I annotate? I think I can. Yes. Okay, draw. Here we go. I'm just going to draw right here. If you take this, yeah, there we go. My green part. If you take that right there and compare it with the top portion of this curve, which is where like long-term emphasmatics are at, this right here has that curve, right? And then this has this curve. So which one's steeper? Well, it's going to be the normal, right? So in that regard, the emphasmatic actually has decreased compliance because they're at such a high, a lung volume that they can't stretch as well. But if you look at this compliance curve right here and we say that, oh, okay, let's look at it right here. Maybe tidal volume for someone who's starting to become emphasmatic is right there. Well, if we compare that to the normal, right? This, let me change the line. If we compare this, we'll try blue. If we compare this blue line right here to the green normal line right here, which one's more steep? Well, it's going to be the emphasmatics, okay? So you really have to understand what they're asking for in that, in the question, okay? Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So if you're going to look at your question here, to summarize, if asked on the exam if compliance is increased or decreased, I would want to select decrease, but this graph states that it's increased. So remember that, yes, you would want to answer that emphasmatics have decreased compliance because most emphasmatics are up here at this level. And we just said that curve right there, if we were to follow, well, I guess not perfectly right there. I can't erase. Compared to this curve right here for a normal individual, that's going to be less steep. Does that make sense? Hopefully that helps. You're definitely not subpar trivia teammate. If you're subpar on that, I'm subpar as well. My daughter, she knows the Disney stuff, so she may have won the MVP for that one. But I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any remaining questions. I'd be more than happy to kind of talk through it with you. And yeah, let me know. Thanks.